one more big takeaway is Coca-Cola remains the anecdote, the gasoline, everything. When in doubt, Coca-Cola will get you through. And I probably sustained 50% of my calories for the race in granola.
Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I am a sports dietitian, distance runner, and mom of 2. I see clients virtually through my private practice, Eat for Endurance, and it was through my client work that I was inspired to start this podcast because I wanted to show that there really is no one-size-fits-all style of eating, particularly when it comes to performance nutrition. I'm often intrigued by the many different ways professional and recreational athletes fuel themselves for athletic success, health, and enjoyment, and I share these in-depth nutrition stories with you through my Athlete Nutrition Profile series. There really is no such thing as perfect eating, not even amongst elite athletes, and it's valuable to explore the often winding pathways of their nutrition journeys. I also share current research and recommendations on a variety of nutrition topics through my Registered Dietitian interview series. Please check out my episode library if you're new to the show. There's some really great stuff in there. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. I'm really excited to kick off my Recreational Athlete Nutrition Profile series today, and my first guest is triathlete Kenny Brighton from Florida. So why did I choose Kenny? Well, he got in touch with me a while back when I was just about to go on maternity leave with my second daughter because he was looking to do 10 Ironman events in 10 days, which is a big goal, obviously, when just one Ironman is 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and 26.2 miles of running times 10. So obviously, you need the help of a coach and a dietitian and just having a really supportive team to help you get through that. So I wasn't able to help out, but he worked with someone I referred him to, and we did stay in touch. His event got shifted because of COVID. And I thought, well, why don't we have a chat, and I'll make him my first guest. And we did a little pre and post event interview just to kind of see what he was planning and see how it all went and where he's at now. So I had a great time chatting with him. I really hope you guys enjoy this one and stay tuned for more of these. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with recreational triathlete Kenny Brighton. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
So far, so good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad you came on. I'm doing well. How I'd like to start this interview is for you just to introduce yourself with your name, where you're from, what you do, and what sports you enjoy and compete in.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it. And again, thank you for having me. My name is Kenny Brighton. I am based here in Gainesville, Florida, which is where the University of Florida is located. Grew up in southern Florida outside of Boca Raton and went to college here at UF and ended up moving back a couple of years ago. And I am actively involved in triathlon, so swim, bike, run. Previously, I played water polo. My background is in swimming, and then got into marathon running and then ultra marathon running, and we all know how the snowball kind of progresses from there.
Yep.
But currently focused on triathlon.
Awesome. And you were training for something called the EpicDeca, which is 10 Ironman events in 10 days in Hawaii, I believe. And it was scheduled for August 2020, and obviously we know that didn't happen with COVID, but I understand you're training for it now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So it got postponed, and so that added another year to my training, which was fine. But it became a difficult year because the first time I did it, I didn't really know what the training would feel like. I didn't know what that kind of volume would feel like, so I kind of went into it naive, which was nice. But going in for the second year, I knew exactly what it felt like, and I knew exactly how long it would take and exactly how much it would hurt. So it was much more of a mental battle. And then, unfortunately, with the pandemic still kind of dragging on, they have postponed it again just recently until next year, which is actually very problematic for me because my wife, on a positive note, my wife and I are expecting our first child coming up.
Congrats. That's
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah, we're really excited. And with the birth of our daughter coming up here at the end of summer, I just don't know what next year is going to look like. And this is a big time commitment, and I want to be around and present. So I ended up dropping out of the race. But I've been training for this particular race and this distance basically exclusively for the last 2 years. So I can't not attempt it. So long story short, at the end of April, I'm going to do it on my own. 10 Ironman distance events in 10 days. Here in Florida, I just have to know if I can do it. I can't let that go unknown.
I completely get it. I probably would feel the same way. I mean, 2 years of your life, that's a long time, and that's awesome. And, a lot of people are doing stuff like this, especially with races being so uncertain. I mean, hopefully, with vaccinations happening and all of that, it seems like more fall events are more likely to happen. In what sense or how they'll be changed, it's unclear, but good for you for doing that. That's amazing. And again, congrats on, you having a daughter. When's your wife due?
July 3rd.
Ooh, well, that will come up fast.
It's coming up so quick.
It's like fast and slow. I mean, I don't know. I can only speak to my experience, but that's so cool. As you may know, I have 2 daughters. Daughters are awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So very excited for you guys. That's awesome. All right. So I want to hear, first of all, when did you start? When was your first Ironman? How did you get into Ironman specifically?
So it's actually, I'm almost embarrassed to say, I've only done one full Ironman. I've only done one triathlon, which is that full Ironman. So This will be a significant jump for me, at least in terms of triathlon. Like I said, I do have a background in ultra endurance events, ultra endurance swimming, ultra endurance running. So, there's some carryover, but I basically got into Ironman because I grew up as a swimmer. So that came very naturally to me, which is often a barrier for people to get involved. And then having the ultra marathon background, the running was obviously not an issue. And then my roommate at the time was a cyclist or was becoming a cyclist, I guess. And so that just kind of led me to getting out on the bike here and there. And then it just made sense to tag along with him when he was doing his first Ironman.
And it's really interesting. So you've only done one triathlon, and that one triathlon was an Ironman. Is that what I heard?
Yeah,
correctly?
That's correct. Yeah, exactly. We jumped in both feet, and we did Ironman Mount Tremblant in Canada, and we actually had a horrendous day. It rained the entire time. It was cold. I had a mechanical issue on my bike. I got kicked in the ribs on the swim and had to backstroke the whole thing. So it wasn't an enjoyable experience, but I guess it was enjoyable enough to continue.
I mean, again, I think endurance athletes, we're a special breed of people. It's not like this. I mean, it's just we like the challenge, right? It's all about that. But okay, amazing. And in this whole time, so you haven't been interested in even doing a shorter distance triathlon? That just was something you didn't want to try, even for training purposes?
So it's been a series of unfortunate events. I've had, between that point and where we are now, I've had 3 full distance triathlons, Ironman distance triathlons that I have been registered for, but either because of an injury or because of a hurricane, I had to pull out of. And then when the pandemic came, that canceled 2 of them there. So I've tried to do a few more, but it hasn't been in the cards.
I get it. Okay. And why do you give me a little background on your nutrition, or maybe we can start with the present day. This obviously is just you have such high energy needs for this. I'm really curious because, we didn't end up working together, but I remember speaking to my colleague Lauren about it, and we were joking, you basically just need an IV drip of calories at all times or something, just how challenging it is to just not have you be in a deficit constantly.
Right.
With this level of training. So yeah, why don't you give us a sense first about your training? What does it take to train for an event like this? Because I think for most people, just an Ironman distance in itself, I know for me, since I'm just so not a triathlon person myself, but just an Ironman in itself is whoa. So 10 Ironman events in 10 days. How do you even go about training for that? So let's speak training first. Yeah. How do you even go about training for that?
Yeah, I mean, and take this with a grain of salt. Having never done this before, this could be way off base. Talk to me again in 2 months, and I'll let you know how.
Are you working with the coach?
I am. Yeah, I'm working
Okay,
with a coach.
got it.
So it's volume. I mean, it's time in the pool, it's time in the saddle, it's time on your feet. So we train. It varies week to week. We have some down weeks, but probably on average we're between 23 on the low end and 30 on the high end. We don't hit 30 very often. And that's split up predominantly with bike, probably 4 bike sessions a week, 2 of which being 4 hours or more, usually closer to some 8-hour sessions in there. I grew up as a swimmer, so we can kind of cheat on that a little bit. So we do 2 long swim sessions a week, 8,000 yards at a time. So I'm in the pool for a good 2 hours. And then we do 3 or 4 run sessions a week as well. And that doesn't include any mobility or strength training, which we sprinkle in as well. So it's just a long time. And I think compared to Ironman training, it's probably a little less intense in terms of heart rate and perceived effort, although we do sprinkle that in there as well. But it's long, mentally challenging blocks of biking, running, and swimming.
How many hours per week are you putting in then?
So between 23 and 30.
Wow. It's like a part-time job.
it's a part-time job that all occurs before 9 a.m. in the morning. So I'm waking up extremely early during the week.
Wow. What do you do for a living?
I'm a fundraiser, actually. I work for a cancer nonprofit. And so the pandemic has been one of the few positives has been I'm not traveling nearly as much as I was because of the pandemic. So I have a little more flexibility in terms of my training. But it's still, try to get it all done before 9 o'clock. So it's difficult.
Oh, just wait till you have a baby.
And that's why I pulled out of the race. You're exactly right. I don't think you can do both effectively. And I definitely want to be an effective father.
Yeah, no, my husband wakes up at like 4 a.m. to get his runs in, but he can't even do that anymore now because my 4-year-old wakes us up by 4 a.m. and will have a complete shit fit if he leaves the house. The only thing he can do is ride our Peloton bike. And funny enough, this morning, she literally came into our room at 5 a.m. And because I think like a few days before she was just hanging on the couch playing while Eric rode the bike. But she literally climbed into our bed in the dark at 5 a.m. and yelled at my husband, "Daddy, it's 5 a.m. Go ride your bike. You know you want to ride your bike." I'm like, what on earth?
That's so funny. I saw your
Instagram. Yeah, you saw
your Instagram post this morning, and I laughed about it. It's great.
It's seriously though. I mean, I need to like package her up and market her as like an exercise alarm clock. I swear, it was. Did
he get up and ride?
No, he did not. He was like, "Go away, leave me alone." Where's the snooze button on this?
I love that.
But we did get up and make pancakes, so
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. But yeah, so I want to know before we get into the nutrition side of things, what makes someone want to do 10 Ironman events in 10 days? I can guess, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I've done a number of endurance events, and I've been in some, been in the pain cave pretty deep. But I think it's it's about the challenge. That's why we all do it. I want to push as far as I can push, and 10 feels like maybe as far as I can push. And I just kind of want to experience what that feels like, and maybe I'm going to find 10 isn't the edge, and I'm going to have to go further one day. I don't know. But it's it's just about finding that limit and then hopefully getting through that, because in 10 days there's going to be dark moments, there's going to be mental battles, and I just want to get really good at fighting those and ultimately being victorious over those. And you have to put yourself in that kind of a situation to truly experience that kind of a situation.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, obviously having a child is nothing like that, but I really vividly remember Eric and I prepping for the birth of our first daughter, and especially for me, just going through the whole labor and delivery process. I was trying to do it without medication, and I was thinking to myself, "Oh God, believe me, it's worse than 10 Ironman events in 10 days." Although actually, I think that's actually that's a tough thing. I don't know if I'd rather do 10 Ironman. Well, first of all, I don't think I could swim; I'd probably drown. But if I could do those sports, I'm not sure if I'd rather do that or give birth again. That's a really tough call.
Well, listen,
traumatic.
let me tell you, having not experienced pregnancy and we have not experienced the birth yet, I think I would much rather do the 10 Ironmans
Yes.
because watching my wife go through this, I mean, she's incredibly tough, but I would not want to be, having to deal with some of the pains and just the things that go along with growing another human being.
Yes.
So
It's
I'll
a
take
lot.
10 Ironmans any day.
Yeah, it's a lot. But my point was that I think even as a father, and Eric and I were talking about this a lot, that it's good. It's mental training. I mean, it's physical training too, but like we got pregnant in 2016 and we had completed like this whole string of ultras in 2015. So it wasn't that long before. And I think in 2016 was the last time I did a marathon. It was a really hard marathon for me. And I was just thinking like that builds such mental toughness and physical toughness, of course, but really it's the mental toughness that you need as a parent. And especially, oh gosh, like some of those early, I mean, every stage of having a kid is hard in different ways, but I really leaned back on my own experiences. I've only run 150 miler, but it was pretty brutal for me. And I remember just being in labor and going through all that and leaning on that. So I can totally understand like wanting to find that edge, wanting to push yourself, especially if you've gone through other hard things in your life, or you're just kind of trying to prove to yourself that you can do hard things, so
Right.
I totally get it. I mean, I haven't myself done anything like that, but I get why people do it.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've kind of pushed to find the edge or your limits in other aspects of your life outside of sport? Or do you think something outside of sport has driven you to find this? Or is it just in your personality and your genetic makeup? Or what do you think?
I think for me, I think I'm a very routine and methodical person. And this has just kind of evolved into being part of my routine. So, it's become what I do. Like it's almost on autopilot at this point. So I guess the meticulous nature that I have in my professional and personal life kind of bleeds over into my athletic life, and it just kind of manifests itself into this extreme level of endurance athletics. I mean, that being said, I think that I'm probably the type of person who, when I do something, I jump in both feet very quickly, as I did here. So, I guess it makes sense for my personality.
Do you feel like having trained for this event for so long, I mean, I imagine there must be times of burnout, whether it's physical, mental, both. Have you been going through that, or have you been able to maintain a pretty good level of motivation throughout?
So I would say up until probably last 2 weeks, really, I've been, really focused and I've had no issues, with motivation, no problems getting up. And, for the last 2 weeks, and I think moving forward, I'm just, not that I'm over it because I want this to go well and I want to be, as well trained as I can be, but it's definitely become more of a mental energy suck for me to get out of bed and get on the bike and bike for 6 hours. It's taking more energy to will myself to do it than it used to. But that makes sense. I mean, I've been doing the same thing for 2 years without actually doing the thing I'm training for. So, I try to cut myself a little bit of slack, and I take solace in the fact that really I'm only 2 months away from getting this done, so I can do anything for 2 months.
It's kind of like a little taste of what Olympic athletes go through, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, can you imagine? I mean, and they just postponed the Olympics, and I just can't imagine. Like, I was talking with Erica the other day, actually, we were going for a run together, and I was like, can you imagine like trying to time your training and when you peak and all that, and then the target keeps shifting. It's tricky.
You make a great point, and they have it so much more difficult than I do because they have, like you said, they have to peak on a single day. I just have to be okay over a 10-day period. I listened to a great interview with Gwen Jorgensen, a triathlete, gold medalist, and she talked about that very thing, how difficult it was for an entire lifetime of athletics to come to fruition at that exact moment. I mean, I can't imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, talk about pressure to have a day, right?
It's
crazy.
It is.
Now, so in your event, are you going to be having any support? Is it self-supported? Like, what is this? Are you doing the same course? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll do the exact same course every single day. So it'll be a pool swim, which the actual EpicDeca, there were some pool swims there as well. So that's not a big deal. So it'll be a pool swim, and then it'll be the same bike along A1A, which is a road along the coast in Florida, which is so very scenic and very flat, which is great. So same bike course, it'll be an out and back, and then the same marathon course as well, but that will be a 5 mile loop course to make it easy to get aid and see people. And so yeah, it'll be the same course every day. So that'll be a mental battle as well, but just it's so much easier from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah, wow, that's gonna be interesting because I think I remember when we talked on the phone like ages ago, like back in 2019, and
Yep.
I think you were telling me about the EpicDeca, and was it on different islands in Hawaii, or I forget what it was like.
Yeah, it was 2 races per island, so you were traveling every other day. So obviously
That was it.
different courses, which would have been great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not going to be the same level of experience for sure,
No,
but such is
that's a
life.
little bit more of an adventure.
Yes,
But
yes.
okay, but you know what? This is, I'm curious about, I mean, obviously, like you have control over the course. It's flat. You're familiar. It's like you're on your own, home turf. So
Yeah.
there are some aspects of that making it easier, but obviously it doesn't have that same appeal or excitement as, say, like going to Hawaii and going to all these different places and
Right.
whatever. But wait, so when's the target date for this?
We're starting April 27th, which is Tuesday, and then it'll be 10 days from there.
All right. I'm going to get you back on the show after you've done it, if that's
Okay.
okay with you. And we're going to chat about it because I'm very curious how that will have gone.
That makes two of us, Claire.
Yeah. Okay. We haven't even talked about nutrition yet. So let's take the rest of this time to chat about the nutrition because
Sure.
as I touched upon, you obviously have insane nutrition needs. And I'm curious kind of how you've been approaching that. Maybe we can kind of back up a little bit, as much as you're comfortable speaking about kind of your background on your diet and your relationship with food as a younger athlete, how things have evolved and changed over time. And then we can kind of chat about what goes into fueling 10 Ironman events in 10 days.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, the reason I got in touch with you is I was in a difficult place when it came to eating. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think my story is not uncommon where it just kind of evolves from trying to have a healthy diet and then you try to dial it in a little bit more and then you try to dial it in a little bit more and then you try to dial it in a little bit more. And before I know it, I am not eating any carbs and I have cut out all dairy and I'm eating basically lettuce all day. So that's kind of where I was, and that's sustainable it's not healthy, but you can do it for a period of time. Your body's gonna, make do, but it's not good for you. And I was starting to realize that, I wasn't recovering the way I used to, and I was cold all the time, like just some things that didn't make sense to me. And so I knew that I couldn't will myself through this because I had tried before and I just couldn't get myself to do what I knew I needed to do, which was eat more. So I reached out to you and a couple other people, and eventually, through a lot of trial and error, found someone that was good for me and someone that got me on the right track with eating enough and fueling enough. So compared then to now, my relationship with food is completely different. By no means is it great now, but it's completely different than it was probably in 2019 when we were first speaking. And I think that journey was important for me because after you couldn't do it because you were going on maternity leave, I found some other people, and I found a lot of things that wouldn't work for me that I tried and didn't work, like weighing my food. That didn't work for me. That only made things worse. So it's been a good journey to get here, and now we just need to continue building on that progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you still working with a dietitian now? Or
I
no?
am, yeah.
Good. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, what you're describing, I literally just recorded last week or maybe it was the week before. It's relative energy deficiency in sport. I'm not sure if you've heard that term. Yeah, RED-S.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is chronic underfueling. It is extremely common And I mean, and you told me before, like, I mean, I don't know if you were ever formally diagnosed with an eating disorder, but like, did you ever seek like specific help with a therapist or who specializes in eating disorders or anything like that, or no?
No, didn't. So, it's funny. It was on my to-do list. And when the pandemic came around and people stopped
Mm,
doing in-person appointments, it just kind of fell by the wayside. And I think where I am now, I'm feeling pretty good about my food. But if things were to change, I would be the first step I would take, because that's something you need to nip in the bud pretty quickly.
yeah,
And I think, and you can probably understand this as well, with my daughter coming into the world, like, I want to be able to model healthy food behavior. I don't want her to see her
exactly.
dad weighing all his food and, not being able to eat at restaurants because it's not healthy enough. Like, I want this to be, something that she can follow as well. So it's become very important to me beyond just
That's
training.
yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. At what point was this all happening? Was this during like the Ironman that you did? Like when, like, give me a little bit of a timeline.
Yeah. So the worst of it was probably post my first Ironman and pre beginning to train for the DECA, when I was in
Got it.
training for just individual standalone Ironman events.
And
That's when
that's
this
where
was
all the
real.
injuries came in, I
That's
assume.
exactly right. That's when I had my knee injury. That's when my hormones kind of took a nosedive. That's when everything really came to a head, and I started realizing that something was probably wrong.
And where did you get just out of curiosity, like the inspiration to cut out carbs or eat only lettuce, as you described? I'm sure you're eating more than lettuce, but or cut out dairy. Was it kind of looking to other athletes? Was it reading articles? Like what, or did you just think of it yourself?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint like one article or one documentary or like one instance where I said I'm gonna stop eating carbs. Like, and it was never about. It didn't at least start about being about weight for me. Like, I never thought about calories, never worried about any of that. And I just, for whatever reason, thought I could just keep drilling down on my diet, and maybe less carbs would be helpful, which is totally the wrong answer. But it
Mm,
just kind of just it almost became out of my control. Like, the snowball just kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and I just kept going along with it. And I started
yeah.
doing things, and I think because I'm so routine, it just became part of my routine, not eating rice and not eating potatoes and like things that don't make sense, but to me they did.
Were you married at the time?
No.
Okay. At what point did you get married?
I got married probably in the midst of that.
Okay.
Um, and I would say that probably didn't have that much of an impact on my nutrition.
Yeah, I was just curious kind of what led you to finally emerge out of that dark hole of essentially anorexia.
Yeah, I mean,
Like what kind of pushed you out of it?
I think it was just me beginning to realize the physical toll it was taking in my body, just like not recovering like I used to after a session, and being cold all the time,
Yeah.
and just like losing arm hair, like weird things that just didn't make sense to me. I'd never experienced before. And then doing some research and seeing all the articles online and whatnot, I started to have some suspicions, and I knew I wasn't fueling enough. There were workouts where I wouldn't eat during the workout, and I was trying to do the classic I'm going to save those calories for later
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so I knew what I was doing. I just didn't know it would have that kind of an effect on me. No one thinks that it's gonna happen to them, but it did, and I realized how serious it could be moving forward if I didn't act on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate you opening up. I'm sure many people can relate. And I've had men on before who, talked about their own experiences with eating disorders, and it's extremely common among men. It's just not as, I mean, I think it's more talked about now, but it's still less talked about than it is with women. So I really like it when, we can explore it in men, and
Yeah.
so men don't feel like they can't talk about it. You absolutely can, and it's very it's common. In terms of, okay, let's move on to fueling for the Epic
Yeah.
Deca.
Yeah.
And it sounds like where you're at now, like you're still in your journey of recovery. And I'm sure that there are still days where you struggle or have challenges, but it sounds like, and we can get into it, it sounds like you're able to fuel more appropriately and you're feeling good. And hopefully you've been injury free and all of that in this 2 years of crazy training.
Yeah.
So that's a very good sign, obviously. And you
Hmm.
have a baby girl on the way, which is hopefully means your hormones are kind of back to normal,
Yes.
and which is great. And yeah, so what does your nutrition look like with this level? This up to 30 hours of exercise per week. I mean, you're just burning thousands and thousands and thousands of calories all the time, every day. How are you getting that nutrition in? And how are you mentally able to get the nutrition in and coming from this place of extreme deprivation and restriction?
Yeah. So we can unpack that one at a time. So in terms of nutrition, my coach and myself, we kind of break it down between like my baseline calories, which are like, what I just need to eat during the day, and then fuel, things that I eat on or around, during a session. And because the nature of the race, I'm going to need to be able to eat enough not only to sustain myself for that day, but also to recover for the next day and continue doing it. We're trying to mimic that as much as we can in each session. So, for every hour that I'm active, whether it be on the bike or in the pool or on the run, I'm trying to get in at minimum 80 grams of carbohydrates an hour, but
Hmm.
closer to 100 grams of carbohydrates an hour, which is easier on the bike than it is on the run, and definitely
Yeah.
easier than on the swim. But we're trying to come in between 80 and 100 grams of carbs an hour, and then during the race, hopefully going above that. We've been really training my gut to be able to take all that in without feeling nauseous or anything like that. So that's been really good, actually. And that's a very wide array of food. That's some gels, that's some like, scratch powder on the bike. It's Pop Tarts, it's peanut butter wrap, it's bananas, it's dates, it's potatoes, it's literally everything and anything, because during the race, who knows what I'm going to feel like eating? I mean, everyone's
Hmm.
got this great plan of they're going to eat, 3 gels an hour, and then they're going to have some scratch. And, it might start out that way, but, 10 hours in, let alone 10 days in, you're not going to want to take down another gel. I might want a burrito or something. So I'm just trying to eat as much as I can in as many different ways as I can, just so I'm accustomed to that when the race comes.
That sounds like an awesome plan. And yeah, I mean, often it can be really hard for people to get in more than 90 grams an hour. That's often the point at which the GI system starts rebelling. So if
Yes,
you're able to get 100 in, that's fantastic.
we we
That's really good.
yeah, we definitely dealt with our share of rebellion, but I
Yeah.
think we pushed. I think we pushed past it. Um,
Yeah.
and then during the day, we stick to basically on average a 5,000 calorie a day plan. Sometimes it's a bit more depending on the day. And then the big takeaway is 5,000 calories non-negotiable. Have to eat that. But if I'm hungry, keep eating. Like we don't
Yeah.
track calories every day. Like every now and again we'll do a full day of eating just to make sure I'm hitting where I need to be. But we've got to the point where there's no such thing as too much. I just need to continue to eat when I'm hungry, and go from there.
That's great. That's good. Have you noticed changes like I imagine when you were moving from this point of restriction in your life to training so heavily, and obviously you eased into it, or at least I hope you did,
Yeah.
but also to completely overhauling your approach to food. Granted, this was happening over a period of time. I imagine your body was changing quite a bit. And like, was that something that was, or yeah, I don't know. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so maybe because it happened so incrementally. Like obviously I gained weight, but it wasn't a significant amount. Like I think I filled out. I think I put on some muscle. I've definitely put on some fat, but it was never anything that made me look in the mirror and say, "Oh my God, what am I doing to myself?" Like
Hmm.
it was maybe because I see myself every day, but I think at my lowest weight, it wasn't all that different. I mean, we're talking like, 15, 20 pounds maybe from where I am now. Um, and I'm 6'4", so I don't, I guess I don't see it maybe as much
Yeah.
as I thought I would.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure it's hard to imagine now because you're just still in the thick of this and you still have a little over a month to go before this happens. But are you looking forward to taking a break?
I mean,
Yes.
that will be such a huge shift for you. I mean, obviously recovering from that kind of event is going to be next level, and we can talk about it when we talk again. But yeah, it sounds like you're kind of ready to just chill out for a little bit.
Yeah, I had a rest day yesterday, which is rare, but I had one yesterday, and I slept in until about 7:45, and I was laying in bed when my alarm went off, and I said to myself, I'm going to do this every day when my race is over. Like my wife is probably rolling her eyes, or will roll her eyes when she hears this, but I'm looking forward to the downtime, because usually downtime kills me, and I hate off days, and I want to be training, but I think with this behind me, no matter how it turns out, I'm just going to be ready to take a step back and, go out for a bike ride if I want to, and go out for a run if I want to, and not have to worry about paces or power or intervals in the pool, and just kind of be my own captain for a while. And inevitably, I'll get back into doing something else more structured, but I'm going to enjoy the interim period, especially with it coinciding with the lead up and the birth of our daughter. I definitely want to be as committed as I am to training, to supporting my wife and being with our new family.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic plan.
Yeah.
Kenny, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us, some background on what you're training for and how you got there and everything else. And I wish you so much luck in the rest of your training and in your event. I can't wait to have you back on. We'll schedule something so you can pop on the show again to just fill us in about how all it went. Hopefully it'll be mostly good stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, looking forward to, I'm sure, many more days to sleep in for you before the baby comes, that is.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, after that, it'll be a whole different story, but that's okay. Looking forward to it. And again, just thank you for having me on, and thank you for the podcast. I listen to it very often on my long runs, and it's always entertaining and informative, so I appreciate it.
That's so awesome to hear. Thank you, Kenny. We'll talk soon.
Yep, have a great day.
That interview was completed in mid-March, and it is now the end of May. So let's have another chat with Kenny now that he's completed his event and is on the road to recovery. Welcome back to the Eat for Endurance podcast, Kenny. How's everything going today?
Everything is going good. Thank you again for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're doing kind of a little pre and post event here. And just a reminder, to my listeners, we chatted 2.5 months ago, back in March, when you were prepping for your 10 Ironman events in 10 days. Now, when did you actually do this? It was in April, right?
Yeah, so we did it. Day one was April 27th.
Wow. Okay. So walk me through how it went.
Complicated question. It went it went well, although it didn't go as well as I would have liked. So spoiler alert, we made it through 6 Ironman distance triathlons, 6 consecutive days. The goal was obviously 10, but unfortunately, it turns out I had a stress fracture my tibia on day 5, and then did all of day 6 with the stress fracture. And then we can get into the details, but toward the end of the marathon on day 6, I realized that day 7 would be impossible.
Oh, man. Wait, but on day 5, you didn't know it was a stress fracture, though, right? Like you knew just something was off, or what was going on there?
Yeah, exactly. So day 5 during the marathon, my left, like my lower leg, kind of by my ankle, I guess I would say, it was sore. I could still run. It was definitely sore. And then we finished the marathon on the night of day 5, and we iced it. I went in the Normatec boots and did everything I could for recovery, hoping when I woke up the next day it would be better. And when I woke up on day 6, I couldn't really put all my weight on it, but I was hoping once I got in the pool and stretched it out, it might get better. And it was no better when I got out of the pool. And then it was actually pretty excruciating on the bike. Every upstroke on the pedal was painful. And then at that point, I realized that I probably wouldn't be able to run. So I was prepared to walk the full marathon. And after I was doing 5-mile loops for the marathon.
Mhm.
After the first loop, I realized that I really couldn't even walk. I could only limp. And so I limped for the next 9.5 hours because
Oh my gosh.
I didn't want to just like do 5 3/4 events. I wanted to do all 6. So I just pushed all the way through. not knowing what was wrong. I knew obviously something was wrong. And then after I finished, I went to my orthopedist. They took an X-ray and let me know what it actually was.
Oh man. Oh well,
Yeah.
first of all, congrats for doing
Thank you.
6. That's still a major accomplishment, but man, always a bummer to hear about a serious injury. So
Yeah.
sorry to hear that it was a stress fracture, because I was following along on Instagram and I definitely didn't realize it was a stress fracture. I think you guys thought it was something else, but I mean,
Yeah,
are
we thought
you?
we
Yeah,
thought
sorry,
it
go
was
ahead.
a tendon, like a pulled
Yeah.
tendon or something. Nothing
Mhm.
that was, as serious as it turned out to be.
Are you? I mean, let's talk through, like, I mean, athletes are known to be stubborn and wanting to finish things and pushing through pain and all that kind of thing. Obviously, there's good pain and not good pain, but um, yeah, walk me through kind of your decision to finish. Did you really not think it was going, like, did you really just not think it was a stress fracture? Were you kind of in denial a little bit? Were you just like, I have to finish at all costs? Or kind of what was your thinking there?
Yeah, so I didn't think it was a stress fracture. I thought something was wrong. I thought it was really just like a severely pulled muscle or
Yeah.
something that was definitely painful. But I didn't think it was this serious. And then once I realized I couldn't put my weight on it and I couldn't run and I could barely walk, I knew we'd have to pull the plug just because I wouldn't be able to continue
Mm,
doing running, swimming, or biking in this capacity. So at that point, I knew day 7 was an impossibility. And so I just focused all of my energy on getting through day 6, because there was nothing else to have to recover for. If it took me all 24 hours to walk the marathon, that would be fine because I could sleep the entire next day. I didn't have to worry about doing another one. And at
mm,
that point, not knowing it was a bone injury, I wasn't all that concerned that I would make something worse. I just thought this was
yeah.
pain, this is what it was going to be, and I could certainly tolerate it. Had I known at that point it was a stress fracture and that I was probably making it worse, the decision making might have been different, but I'm not even really sure about that at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really hard when you have this goal in your mind for so long. And as we chatted about back in March, like, it's not like this is the first time that you've been trying to do this event. Like,
Right.
it's been called off and you've just had all of these obstacles thrown in front of you and you just wanted to finally get this done. So I can understand like a certain degree of like, I'm going to finish this no matter what. And I say this as someone who has also like basically like limped through the end of a 50 miler just because I
Yeah.
was like, damn it, I'm gonna finish this thing. I don't care if my foot is like broken, which
Right.
is really stupid. But I have been there and I know the feeling of just like having worked so hard for something and wanting to finish it. But obviously like the rational, smart athlete side of things is like, at what cost? When is it not worth it? All of those things. But I'm glad you're at least on the other side and on the road to recovery. I mean, how
Thank
is it
you.
feeling now? How many weeks are you in a boot, or like what's going on right now with your
Yep.
recovery?
Yep. So I'm in a walking boot,
Okay.
and week. This is the end of week number 2 in the boot, and the doctor thinks I'll be in it for 4 to 6 weeks, likely
Mm.
closer to 6 weeks. Um, and it's certainly better. It's only painful to do certain things. I got back in the pool this week, no kicking, just pulling, and that's been nice just to be able to do something again. And really, it's more of an inconvenience at this point than it is something that's painful. Luckily, it's my left leg, so I can still drive.
Mm.
So really, it could be worse. And the physician told me that had I have pushed on for a couple more days, there was a real chance I would have actually broken the bone. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we made the decision that we made looking back.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's back up for a little bit and then we'll kind of, fast forward again to where we are now.
Sure.
But talk to me about, we talked about nutrition, obviously. And did you feel like, talk to me about how nutrition went in those first 6, or the 6 that you did, I mean. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
did nutrition go according to plan? Were there any kind of surprises or unexpected things that happened? Just, yeah, how did your fueling go overall?
Yeah, so overall, it went really well. And that's because we ended up, as many endurance athletes can understand, we ended up throwing out the entire plan we had because we found out it wasn't agreeing with me
Mm.
during the race. So backing up a little bit, even though we did the race down in South Florida, between Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach, a little town called Deerfield Beach. And I grew up there, so I knew this, but for some reason it just didn't occur to me that it was going to be extremely hot. And it was unbearably hot. And so that obviously affects your gut. So on
Yeah.
day 1 and day 2, came into it with a really well-defined nutrition plan. We knew how much I should be taking in terms of carbohydrates. We had all the food prepared that we knew I had been training with and I knew I could tolerate. So we stuck to that day 1 for sure. And everything felt fine on the bike. And then during the marathon of day 1, I was extremely nauseous. I threw up multiple times.
Ugh.
And when I finished, I was too nauseous to really eat a good recovery meal like I needed.
Yeah.
And so day 2, we made a few tweaks, but nothing crazy. And the same thing happened again. Felt fine on the bike, had a horrible run, threw up multiple times, and again, couldn't eat the meal I needed to for recovery. So the night of night 2, my coach was there, my wife was there, and we kind of powwowed together and just said, we're going to throw everything out the window. We're going to eat, whatever appeals to you, and we're just going to shoot to eat a lot more food. And day 3, we ate a ton of food, and I felt unbelievable the entire day. Felt fine on the marathon, was able to eat a significant amount of food when it was over. And so we stuck to that plan for the rest of the time, day 4, 5, and 6, and felt great nutritionally.
So wait, just to clarify, so were you not doing more real food in those first 2 days? Were you doing more sports product, or when you say eating a lot of food, like what do you mean by like what was the real difference?
Yeah, so in the first 2 days, and so throughout the entire race, the only quote unquote sports product I used scratch my water bottles on the bike. Everything else I had was real food because I had support the entire time. And so the difference between day 1 and 2 and then the rest, day 3, 4, 5, 6, is the quantity of food I took in. So I was still using the scratch. I was just eating beyond what I did on day 1 and 2. I was just eating at a whole nother level.
And that's really interesting that it was eating more food that helped you feel better and not throw up. Isn't that interesting, right?
It was crazy. And yeah, I was as surprised as anyone else. And, in going from day 2 to day 3, during day 3, for whatever reason, we found the food that really clicked, really agreed with me. I could eat it and it didn't, it tasted good. And I just continued to eat those, 4 or 5 same foods throughout the rest of the event and stuck to those and everything went fine.
Awesome. And just to clarify, I'm not surprised actually that eating more food led you to feel better ultimately. And I really love that you were able to adjust and focus more on what appealed versus like having some plan. I mean, I assume that the plan you guys created for those first 2 days were things that you tried in training. It's not like you just picked out of thin air, like, we'll eat these foods. It's like these were foods that were tried and tested, right?
Exactly. Like we knew
Okay.
throughout all my training, we ate pretty much the same foods in the same order at the same level of carbs per hour. And so we just tried to replicate that. And then when it stopped working, we just decided, okay, we know you have to get in between 90 and 100 grams of carbs an hour. We're going to shoot for more, and we're going to do it in any form you can take it. If it's soda, it's going to be all soda. If it's frozen pizza, it's going to be all frozen pizza. Like we just threw caution to the wind and just started eating as much as we could.
Perfect. Good. And again, I want to highlight, you just said 90 to 100 grams of carbs per hour. And I want to highlight that to my listeners because again, this is an endurance event. And we know now, like it used to be thought that we can only absorb up to a certain amount, like more like 60 grams or 60 to 90 even. But, we know that with training, if you train your gut, and especially for these long endurance events where we really need it, you can train your body to take in more than 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And especially if you're getting different types of sugars in, glucose and fructose, or you're just getting a variety of foods. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it's something that I want to highlight because I think a lot of people are underfueling all the time,
Right.
And if you really want success, especially in extreme conditions and in your
racing? I mean, I know this was different. It wasn't a race. This was like a,
A
self-paced
challenge,
thing, a
adventure,
challenge. Exactly. But still, you need to be taking in that nutrition. It's so, so key. Got it.
yeah.
So I'm so glad that you guys were able to, discover what was going on and adjust your plan accordingly. And I think that this happens all the time in longer events. Even within a marathon, you might have a plan, or whether it's a racing strategy or pace strategy or a fueling strategy, and something happens. Maybe the weather's crazy, or maybe you feel a different way, and you have to kind of problem solve. And problem solving is such a key part of it. So clearly, you and your team brought that to the table, and you were able to kind of work that out. So that's fantastic. I'm glad you weren't puking for 6 days. That's no fun.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, after day 2, when we just threw the plan out the window, it almost became more fun, which I think helped me a lot mentally, because at
Mm,
that point I was just eating whatever I wanted. Like I never have frozen pizza, is a great example, but I ate a full frozen pizza every day, day 3, 4, 5, and 6. Obviously cut up throughout the day, but it just became fun because I was like, oh, I never get Pop-Tarts. I'm going to eat these. They appeal to me right now. So it was mentally
totally.
helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always tricky too, especially with the run piece where we don't necessarily want to try new things where we haven't trained with them before, and maybe it's a little scary. You don't know what the effect will be, but maybe you see something on an aid station table or someone's offering you something, you're like, ooh, that looks really good. So it's always a little tricky because like there's always that old adage of like nothing new on event day, but
Right.
at the same time, if something looks really appealing, and it's also you have to know what your stomach's like. Are you the type of person that typically can handle, foods and different things or not? But it's I think that's always a nice flexibility to have, is to be able to kind of reach out and try different things. And that's why practicing being flexible in training with food is so important, right?
Right.
Um, but awesome, awesome, awesome. How talk to me about the heat and in terms of like hydration and salts. So you had your scratch. Were you doing plain water too? Were you doing salt pills? Like what else were you kind of doing to kind of fight that heat?
Yep. So we were doing, I'm thinking back now, so we were doing on the bike every hour while biking to a bottle of Scratch and then a bottle of just regular Gatorade. And then we were seeing my wife in the van every hour, more or less. And so
Hmm.
we'd refill both those bottles. And at that stop, during the stop, I'd have just a regular bottle of water with in it for the extra
Got it.
electrolytes. So we were basically
Okay.
taking down 3 bottles an hour.
Got it. Okay. So that's how the event went. I know it ended with, I'm sure, mixed feelings maybe of disappointment, but also, I mean, I hope you felt proud of yourself for doing 6 Ironman in 6 days. I know it didn't go the way you wanted, um, but we got to this point and you're injured now. So this might be a question you just absolutely don't know the answer to, but do you have any sense of why you got a stress fracture? And maybe like, I mean, I don't know, maybe the obvious answer is you did 6 Ironman events in 6 days, but I mean, was there any kind of inkling of this in training? Did you kind of feel any niggles, or do you feel like nutrition or training kind of brought you to this point, or I don't know. Talk me through that.
Yeah. So I guess the short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is the physician just thought, listen, your body's not made to run 6 marathons, let alone also bike for
Mm,
112 miles 6 days in a row. Uh, so I think just wear and tear on the body is part of it. But I'm not the first person to do 6 Ironmans in 6 days. Far from that. People have done way more and done it healthy, without getting a stress fracture. So it's definitely doable. I think part of it is just in general, I am a relatively fragile runner. I've had niggles before, and going into this event, although I'm healthy, my knees are typically a problem. And so we definitely, in terms of swim, bike, and run, we were definitely more cautious in terms of volume on the run because we didn't want to come into this injured or get an injury that would prevent me from doing this. And so I think part of it is just we didn't train the run as much as we could have because we were worried about coming in with an injury. So I think
mm,
that could be part of it as well. And and that's how it's been in marathon training for me. I just can't run the volume some people can and stay healthy. So I think we were at a bit of a deficit going in from that perspective. And I'll be honest, if we were going to do this again, which we are certainly not, my wife is listening to this. I promise we're not. I think I would train to not run a single step. I would train to walk at a relatively quick pace because I think it's very doable if you're walking 15-minute miles.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I remember from when I think I walked the last 12 miles of the 50 miler, and I was walking like 15-minute miles for sure. And it was like me and this like super old like army veteran guy, and then this really young girl who was like running her first 50 miler too, and we were all like
Yeah,
in a pack like walking really fast together. Just like we have to meet the cutoff.
exactly. It's
Yeah, no, I
doable.
hear you. I hear you. It's totally doable. No, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but it's
Right,
doable.
exactly.
Okay, got it. So yeah, what kind of lessons learned from this experience? What are you taking away from this entire experience?
I think I'm taking away a couple things. I think one is just the importance of perspective because day one, it was mentally challenging. I mean, it was not so much being in the moment, but thinking about that everything I'm doing now, I'd have to do 9 more times. Like I'd pass something on the bike and think, oh my God, I have to pass that 9 more times. Whereas when we got into day three, I thought I had 7 more of these in front of me, and I became just much more kind of in the routine. I was focused on the moment, and I didn't let myself think about the future. And that was an important. I knew that's the way I should be thinking, but it wasn't until day three that I kind of allowed myself to think that way, and it made a
Mhm.
huge difference just in my mental clarity and my happiness. So I think perspective about keeping the race in perspective was certainly something I'd take away into future endurance events. And then I would be remiss if I didn't take away how important having the right team is.
Mm.
Having my wife, having my coach, having my family, and making sure that each of them prior to the event knew the role they had to play. And so I didn't have to worry about managing the team or managing them or even frankly managing myself. Having that all in place before the event allowed everything to run very smoothly and allowed me to give 100% of my energy to just completing these because everything else was taken care of. So the importance of logistics just critical to success in any event. And then number three, being willing, especially with nutrition, to completely throw everything away and just do whatever feels right at the moment. I mean, it's not ideal, but if you're trying to get through an event, do whatever you can.
Absolutely. And you certainly aren't the first endurance athlete to be like puking your guts out and then just be like, right, that's not working. Okay, let's try something
Right,
else.
right.
I mean, I'm sure many hands will go up, among listeners who have been through that and even on like a smaller scale. But yeah, or maybe it's diarrhea or something. I mean,
Right.
we've all been there. We've all had like a bad experience, or not, maybe not all of us, but many of us have. And it is a lesson. It is an opportunity to learn. I mean, I think events are always opportunities to learn, right? So that's good.
Definitely. And
Okay.
I think I'd be one more big takeaway
Hmm.
is Coca-Cola remains the anecdote, the gasoline, everything. When in doubt, cola will get you through. And I probably sustain 50% of my calories for the race in granola. I ate I ate so much granola, a brand called Grizzly's granola. It was unbelievable, and I would have been lost without it. Super calorie dense food was the ticket.
Nice, nice. And flat Coke, right?
Oh yes,
Okay, yeah. Always flat. Just making that clear for anyone
yep,
whoever wants to try Coke, do not make it bubbly. That's probably not going to end well for you.
exactly.
I'm definitely not a Coca-Cola or cola like flavor person. I know there are like people who are obsessed, but I don't know. I just can't get on board with the flavor for some reason. But
Oh
yeah, I know
man,
it's a huge hit with many people. I think
yes.
I'd be more for like a maybe not like a Mountain Dew. I don't know. I'm not really a soda person. I'm not sure, but
We gotta find something that works for you then because
I
it's so good.
know. I mean, I've just been sticking with my Tailwind or whatever other kind of
Yeah,
drink, and that's been fine. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna do some more experimentation this summer
right,
with
right.
stuff. So let's get back to recovery now.
Yep.
What are you doing to kind of prioritize the recovery? Because obviously having a stress fracture is it's a big deal, and we want to make
Yeah.
sure you heal properly and heal as quickly and as efficiently as possible so you can get back to doing what you love.
Yep.
And yeah, so how are you going about that?
So first and foremost, I have, obviously dialed the activity way back, mainly because I have to, but I'm certainly making a concerted effort to walk less, to really stay off my feet, to uh, when I'm in the pool, I'm swimming less than I probably would. Just kind of backing it off in general. I'm also very focused still on nutrition. I mean, even though I'm not as active as I was, I think the easy thing would be to, pull my calories way back because I'm not training 20 plus hours a week. But I also know that your body works hard to heal yourself. So you want to make sure you're eating enough to allow it to do that, but also eating the right amount of foods, things that are anti-inflammatory, things that are healthy fat. So I'm really focused on that. And then I think the biggest thing, and maybe the most enjoyable thing that I'm doing in terms of recovery, is sleep. Going
Good.
into this, when I was training 20 hours a week, trying to work full time, sleep was a commodity, and I was getting probably very little of it. Now I have a lot more spare time on my hands, and I'm using a lot of that spare time to nap, to sleep in, to wake up with my wife at the same time instead of me waking up hours ahead of time. And sleep is incredibly important for all of recovery. So I hope by putting all that together, I'll recover relatively quickly, and then kind of ease back into whatever the next phase of this looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, enjoy that sleep while you can before the baby comes. What
Uh,
what does your wife do again?
July 3rd, coming up
Oh
quick,
my
I know.
God, that's soon.
It's so
Okay, so
soon.
catch up on your sleep like ASAP.
Yeah.
Also, like yes, your body does have increased needs for all the things you mentioned, and we're really getting the protein in and everything as well. But also, I mean, you're like climbing out of this hole. I mean, there's no way like you can truly replenish your calorie needs like 6 days in a row with Ironman events. I mean, that's just so hard, right? To
Right.
stay on top of that, like you're probably, especially with those first 2 nights, like you didn't even get the nutrition you needed on the run, and then you couldn't get your recovery meal in. Like you were coming out of this whole experience in such a deficit and so depleted, I imagine. So it's taking time not only for your body to kind of heal from the injury that you experienced, but also just from the entire experience of running and biking and swimming so much. So definitely like paying attention to your nutrition, catching up on sleep and resting, like all of those things are so essential to recovery. So that's really good. And one thought, you mentioned going into the event basically like somewhat sleep deprived or just not having as much sleep as one would like to have leading
Right.
up to so many events. Like, I mean, it kind of begs the question of, did that extreme stress on your body from training, lack of sleep, all of that, potentially contribute to your injury,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you weren't letting your body actually really fully recover and adapt to, all of the work you were doing.
Right. I completely agree. And I think, probably, uh, let's say a week out from the event when I started tapering, there was definitely more sleep. But, for the 2 years of training leading up to that, I
Yeah.
was probably sleeping, 5 to 6 hours a night, potentially less. I mean, I guess that's the balance, right? Like you want to be able to do these events, but unfortunately, I'm not a professional athlete. So you have to work them in around your day to day life, around your family. So, yeah, I definitely think that in general, the hole I dug for myself probably didn't do me any favors going into the event.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really big challenge because there are a lot of people who want to do an Ironman. Maybe it's 1 versus 10, but they're training their butts off for these events, and they're working full-time jobs, and they have families, and they're trying to like balance this whole thing out, and it's really really tough
Yeah.
to fit it all in, especially when you're training 3 sports. So yeah, so I think there's a lot going on there, and maybe it isn't so surprising that the injury happened. Still unfortunate, but
Yeah.
it was all a big gamble, I guess. And I
It
think,
was.
I mean, did going into it, what was your confidence level that you were? And maybe I already asked this and I can't remember because I didn't really re-listen to our interview. But like, what was your confidence level at being able to complete all 10?
Yeah, so going into it, from a training perspective, I was completely confident. I think my coach put together an unbelievable plan, executed it. So, everything else notwithstanding, me physically, I thought I was 100% confident I would get through it. Now, obviously, you can't be 100% confident because there are so many external factors you can't control. You're on a
Yeah.
bike, which is mechanical. You have traffic around you. You can have a bike accident. You can get injured, as we proved. So all of that, kind of reduced my confidence because there are so many unknowns. But I think had we have not gotten this or any injury, day 4, 5, and 6, I felt physically great. Like I thought I could do these indefinitely. And then I got injured. So,
Yeah.
it happens. But I was confident, and I am confident that if not for the injury, we could have done 10.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know you promised your wife you would not do this ever again, but is there like a little piece of you that's like,
Yes.
kind of
Here-
impossible, right?
Here's the thing. I would love to do this again as an event. The problem is I don't know if I could will myself to do the training again.
Sure.
Knowing what the training was like, I don't know if I could put myself through the training again. And now having a daughter on the way, I just don't know if there's time for that. So yes, part of me would love to do this again. I just don't know if logistically it's possible. And I don't know if I have the mental fortitude to do another year of that kind of training. Now,
Sure.
all that being said, I think I could do 5 in 5 days with much less training, knowing what I know now. So I could potentially do that again.
I mean, you didn't promise your wife you wouldn't do 5 in 5 days, right?
Claire, that's what I'm talking. This is why I like you.
It's all in
Semantics are
the
very
details.
important here,
Semantics,
yes.
exactly. Oh my goodness. And not to mention, I mean, you could also do one Ironman in
Yes.
one day, and that
Yes.
would be like a walk in the park. That would be like nothing.
That would be. You sleep in my own bed at night, or sleep in a hotel for a full night's sleep? I don't believe it.
I mean, maybe here's what I'll say as a mom to 2 littles. Why don't you see how it goes having the baby? And
Yes.
then you can think about your Ironman but I think it will be nice kind of I think it would be nice starting with one event or even a shorter triathlon, even like a half Ironman or something. And being like, oh, this isn't as bad as the last time. So, this feels easy. But no, in all seriousness, I think it'll be really interesting to see what your future goals are and how things change with parenthood and
Yes.
once you've recovered. And my hope for you, certainly, obviously, is that you make a full recovery as quickly as possible and that maybe after, I mean, so many years of structured, hard training, that you can just get back to like the joy of like just enjoying sports and enjoying being active and enjoying getting out for a let's see what happens kind of run or bike or swim or whatever, and to see how it all feels before kind of putting pressure on yourself to actually do an event again. How does that
No,
sound?
that-
That
that-
appeals or no?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful, and it's interesting. So I would say 99.9% of my training on the bike is done indoors on Zwift.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, because I was doing it so early, I didn't want to be out, in the middle of the night biking. Anyway, but being able to bike outdoors for 6 days in a row has like reignited a excitement to just go out, bike, just cycle. I mean,
Love
so
it.
I'm really looking forward to doing that again.
Sweet. I mean, maybe you could even do like a bike race at some point or just like chill
Yeah,
out.
race across America.
Of course. We can't just start with like a shorter thing. It has to be like the entire country.
Right.
I like how you think. Big goals, big goals. Well,
Exactly.
obviously, the next time you do another big goal, you can come back and chat to me about it. I'd
I'd
love to
love
hear
it.
about it. I always finish up all my interviews with quick bite questions. So let's run through those now.
All right.
Favorite meal or snack when you're in a hurry?
Peanut butter and jelly, no questions asked.
Good choice. Favorite meal or snack when you're not in a hurry?
If I'm not cooking it, it would be my mother's eggplant parmesan. It is unbelievable. Kathy Brighton, shout
Wow.
out.
Yum. Favorite post-race meal or snack?
Good question. I would defer to probably most people's big hamburger, French fries, and cold.
Were you craving that after the Ironman events that you just did? Like, what were you craving after those events?
Like after each night.
Yeah.
It's really weird, actually. I was craving barbecue sauce. Like I would eat. I'm not even a big barbecue sauce fan. I don't know where it came from, but I would eat just like tons of white rice with avocado and some type of lean protein, just covered in barbecue sauce. That's what I was craving. I have no idea.
Salt and sugar, baby. That's where it's
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Cool. Biggest cooking catastrophe if you cook?
I do cook. Uh, I mean, this isn't really cooking, I guess, but my wife and I, back when we were first dating, or actually after we got engaged, we lived together initially. And I was making something on the stove, and we had like one of those flat stove tops, and I walked away, and somehow in doing so, I inadvertently dropped like a supermarket plastic bag over what I was cooking. So it melted over what I was cooking and then onto the cooktop, and then smoke went everywhere. We were living in a condo and alarms were going off. So I not only ruined the meal we were making, but also the top of the stove, and probably pissed off a lot of neighbors.
Oh yeah, burnt plastic is the worst.
Oh, the smell.
Burnt hair too. Those two. Ugh.
We didn't get that far, luckily.
I mean, I feel like I'm thinking of like a hair dryer. Like my hair was stuck in there somewhere. Okay. How do you like your eggs cooked?
Over easy but runny.
Most bizarre or exotic food that you've ever tried?
Durian, that horribly smelly fruit.
Yes. What is your favorite beverage?
Sparkling water.
What foods remind you of growing up?
Like I said, my mom's eggplant parmesan and cereal, actually. I was a big cereal eater back then. Not so much anymore. So honey bunches of oats or frosted flakes really bring me back.
Yes. I still love honey bunches of oats.
So do I.
It's so freaking good.
I can eat a whole box.
Seriously, me too. So good. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
That's actually, I would have a difficult time answering that if it wasn't for my wife being pregnant right now, because we have a lot of ice cream laying around the house. And I've become quite the fan of Cherry Garcia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And last but not least, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Garmin watch, Wahoo Kicker, the indoor bike trainer, and Training Peaks, where all the workouts would be uploaded.
Awesome. Well, Kenny, it's always a pleasure. I'm so glad that you're doing well on the road to recovery and that you were able to complete 6 Ironman in 6 days. That is awesome. So huge congrats again. And wishing you and your wife the best with the birth of your daughter. I hope everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. Love the podcast, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Keep me posted on all your crazy future events.
Oh, I will. Don't worry.
I'll be looking out. All right. Have a good one.
You as well.
All right. So there you have it. A big goal. Didn't quite go as planned, but still a lot was accomplished. A lot was learned for sure. Thank you again, Kenny, for your time and walking us through everything and how it all went, and wishing you a really speedy recovery and, of course, a wonderful birth of your daughter in July. Who wants to come on my show? I am calling out to all your recreational athletes with really interesting things going on. I know I did a little bit of a shout out earlier this year, asking for people on Instagram, and I have a list that I still have to check out and look into. So I haven't forgotten about you. If you already reached out, don't worry, I will be looking at that again and reaching out. But if you haven't reached out to me already and you think you would be a great guest for my show and you want to share your nutrition story and what you're up to, I'd love to hear from you. So please get in touch. And you know how to reach me, eforendurance@gmail.com. You can reach me on Instagram, whatever works. And as always, please give me a rating and review on iTunes if you haven't already. And I would always love to hear from you guys if you ever have any suggestions, feedback, etc. I know I'm not perfect. I have a lot of improving to do with podcasting, and I'm learning every day. So always love to hear from you guys on ways I can make this better and deliver stuff that you guys want to hear. All right, have a good one.